Learning Perek Gimel Halacha Vov. Rambam says Kishaboidik HaChametz B'Leili Abo also. So we're going to learn about making the bracha before you check. It's forbidden to talk while you're checking. The bracha on a bridike after the festival. What's the nusach bracha? What's the content of the bracha? What's the chidush? What's the newsworthy item where it says that you have to make a bracha? Why don't you make a bracha of shechianu on this mitzvah? And the preparation of chametz before the bdika. So Rambam starts kishabodik chametz b'leila abo also. When he bodik chametz on leila abo also, the night of the 14th, or on the 14th by day, or during the festival, he makes a bracha maror koidim sheyascha livdoik. He should make a bracha before he begins. Boratu Hashem, which is one part of the bracha, Lekeinu Melech Olam, which is the second part of the bracha, Asher Gitzonu Tzvaiso, is the third part of the bracha, V'tzivonu Al Bir Chometz, which is the final part of the bracha. Uboidik Umachapes, he checks and he searches B'chol Makoyim Shemachnis Lam Chometz in all those places, as we learned earlier, where he might have brought in Chometz, K'moshe Biyanu in Perek Beis Halacha Vov, because every Hilchos Mitzvah you make a bracha prior to doing that with the onset, like putting on tefillin, before you put on the tefillin, before you read from the Torah, etc. The Isur to speak while you're boidik. Uboidik umachapes b'cholam kaimis. The Rambam's words that you check in every place. Stadvois Maimonides brings from that Abeliezer Yaboik the Rekeach points out that when he's boidik, he should not speak at all for anything that's not for the need of the bdika. And so the Maram, from when he made the brocha, he didn't speak until he finished. And this is the Machon Nesher Rambam that he checks every place, and it's not enough that he started to check, because after the brocha, you have to finish everything of the bdika and not to speak during this entire time. The bracha al b'dika, when you after Pesach, if he checked after Pesach, he does not make a bracha. We learned that if he wasn't b'dika below Yudal, nor did he check during the Yontiv, in order to separate that which was chametz she'oval of Pesach, which is also v'hanomid or abonon, they have to separate it. So the Rambam is madgish that on this b'dika you don't make a bracha. So the Magen Avraham, the Magen Mishnah brings down, Al Bir Chometz is mentioned in the Gemara. What he writes in Shem Bodek, if he checks after the regal, he does not check, is not found in the Gemara. But the Rambam, on his own, concluded this, and it's a correct logic, because certainly one should not make a brocha on B'dika after Pesach, because he's already eating Chometz. And he's only checking in order to separate between chometz that passed, that was allowed to pass through the chag, to the chometz that's afterwards. How can you get a brocha on bir chometz when there's no isud of burning it? But inside the regal, during the regal, it's a mitzvah you shouldn't see chometz, so then burning it has a brocha, and that's clear. However, the Kesef Mishnah argues it's not that clear, because you can make a brocha on chometz that he's burning it even though it's found after the regal. The Kesef Mishnah, who is the Shulchan Aruch, explains the reasoning of the Rambam. Since we hold like Rav Shimon, the midaraisa chometz she'oval Pesach is mutar ba'ano, the Chachamim made it also, and if mutar would become mixed in with that which is also, then the Chacham didn't forbid it. Nimtza, thus we can see that even though the Pesach went by, the Taruvus Chometz is mutar, and therefore he's not over in that such a situation, only even midrabanan, and it doesn't become also after Pesach. So how can you make a bracha on bi'uroi? Because maybe it'll get mixed in with other items, and he won't have any conclusion to the bracha. He won't be fulfilling it. When we turn the page. However, within Pesach, even if it should become mixed together, he has to get rid of it. So according to the Magen Mishnah, after the regal you don't make a brocha for the reason because other chometz is mutar ba'achila, and according to the Kesef Mishnah you don't make a brocha because the chametz that you have might become mutter if it became mixed. Rabbeinu Menoach says you don't make a bracha after the Pesach because it's not the time of Isur Chametz. It's not the time of burning it either. How can you make a bracha? Shekitshonim mitzvos v'tzivon on something which not everyone is involved in. And he says furthermore, since the Isur of Chametz, the whole Pesach is midin knas, you don't make a bracha on a knas. You make a bracha on a mitzvah. It's only a fine. It's not a mitzvah that our Chum said. You burn it because it's also bano, and you don't want to leave it around unless somebody eat it inadvertently and be over on a Rabbanon. What's the Nusach HaBrocha and the Teichen HaBrocha? We find the Gemara Psochim 7b. Every mitzvah you make a brocha on it before you do it. Oiva means not after, but it means before. In Hebrew, there are many words which have nearly all of Hebrew can be understood backwards and forwards, past and future. There are brochas that you make a brocha al, like al bir chometz, and there are brochas that we say al mitzvah tzitzis, and there are brochas that you say le kmo laniach tefillin, or to put on a tzitzis. In Hilchos brochas in Perek Aleph, the Rambam says a general rule. In Rabbeinu Menoach says the nusach habrocha is al bir, but if he said levayar, we do not. He doesn't say it again. He was yotze, even if he said to burn, because everyone agrees that the levayar means future, and therefore the brocha has to be something that he's going to burn loshon osir. When we say li, to, it means future as well, but it's not recognizable from his brocha that he's a Talmud Chacham, like we find in Tosefta. You have to make it a brocha, in a clear, very, very clear language that has in it something special. Therefore, they said to make the brocha al bir chometz. So the Rabbeinu Menoach says, why do you make a brocha al bir chometz? He's not burning it today, but he's only checking. And when is he going to burn it? Tomorrow. Therefore, he's masber that you say al bir chometz doesn't mean lotion of burning, a lotion of consuming with fire, but rather hashbosa, getting rid of it, which is checking it. And when you get it to the house, and when it's ready to be taken out, that is, you've done the entire process, and therefore you make a brocha, like we say by Maasros, Biarti HaKodesh V'Nabayis, which doesn't mean I burnt it, but rather I took it out, and therefore, as soon as I've taken it out, I fulfill the mitzvah by Ma'aser Sheni of taking it, and then I just have to go ahead and throw it into the ocean or into the fire. What's the chiddush of the memra abodik tzorach sheyivorach? Why? What's the Ran tells us? Divrei HaGemorah in Zion Aleph 7a. Somebody who checks has to make a brocha. So he says, obviously, every mitzvah you do a brocha, and he answers that even though he makes a brocha before he starts to check, and consuming it is the main aspect of the brocha, therefore he says al bir, not livdoik, because the brocha is on the Sreifas Chometz, which is going to be on the morrow, and that's his ultimate goal. We will turn the page. The Rosh explains that at a time when you burn a Chometz, you don't make a brocha, because there's no mitzvah not to burn it. Because you bring Chometz to the house, so you shouldn't be over, you should not transgress, that Chometz should not be found in your possession. And you don't make a brocha on an action which is which is meant only to make sure that you don't transgress. It's a preventive action. Therefore, rather than a positive one. Therefore, at the time of the B'dika, the main thing is the B'dikas Chometz, which is the Rabbanon. And it should really make a bracha on B'dikas Chometz. Why do they say on Bir Chometz? Because immediately after the B'dika, you're battle. And the bittul minat Torah, as we learned, nullifying it is considered minat Torah as if it's no longer there. It's as if it's burnt. From the Rambam, we can further point out that you make a brocha on the b'dika because you have to nullify it also, because he writes in all those brochas. So he makes a brocha on bir chometz, whether he checked it by himself, whether others checked it. Because according to the Rambam, who the mitzvah is, when a mitzvah that an adam is mechuyev and he does by himself, he makes a veloshin le. But in a brocha, he's not chayiv to do himself. He can make al, and therefore he explains that you always say al biur chometz because there's no difference if he checks himself or others, and since others can do it for him, he makes a brocha of al and not le. Even though le is also a lashon in the future, and we're not burning in the future because the mitzvah is right now by what we're checking. Furthermore, according to his words, al biur chometz, it goes to the bittul, and not like the rosh that it's referring to the bedika that you're doing right now, because he decided he's going to mevatel it, and therefore he makes the bracha prior to that. He's just checking to know what to nullify as well. According to Rabbeinu Manoach, al biur chometz at the time of the bedika is al because he wants to rid the house of chometz. According to the Ran, the kavanah of the bracha is al shreifas chometz. Al biur chometz of tomorrow, and since the bedika is the beginning of the biur, therefore you must say al. And they made a bracha al biur for tomorrow. According to the Rosh, the bracha al biur chometz has nothing to do with biur chometz of tomorrow, but the mitzvah's bedika itself that the Racham instituted. You make the bracha al biur chometz not on bedika, because right after the bedika you're going to mevatel. That is burning it. From the Rambam, it would seem that since he has concluded in his heart to mevatel, even before he's boidik, he's kept the mitzvah. Therefore, you make the bracha al, because the bracha is also on the bittul that happens immediately after the bracha, even before he checks. Why don't you say a bracha shechiyonu on this mitzvah? The Rishonim discuss this. Why don't you say shechiyonu on bdikas ubiur chometz? We have a rule that on every mitzvah that you do once a year, you make a shechiyonu, like Tiyah Shoif, etc. Agoris Maimonides points out that Shari Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Chofni, he said you should write a shechiyonu. We'll turn the page. At the time of bdikas chometz, because it's a mitzvah that comes actually, as we said, from time to time, but we're not knowing like that, and that's what the Rif says in the Maram, and not as we find written Machse Vitri, which is from Rashi, that you should say shechiyonu. Rabbeinu Manoach explains, you don't say shechiyonu because you don't have any benefit from it. In fact, the opposite is true. The chometz is totally destroyed and you're losing. And you say shechiyonu only on mitzvahs where you have benefit. As in the Gemara says, Kohen mevorach shechiyonu, a Kohen makes a bracha of kiriyonu at the time of Binyan Ben. Why? Because he gets hano oliyode, he gets the 5 shkolim. And he brings furthermore a reasoning of the Baal Yitur. You say shechiyonu only on a mitzvah which comes at a set time. If they didn't do it in a set time, you can't repeat it. Biur chometz doesn't have a set time, because if somebody goes out, as we said earlier, we learned at the beginning of the parak, in a caravan, and he's going to come back, he can be boidik before 30 days before, not necessarily that night. And similarly, so somebody makes his house into a warehouse. He's going to empty it before Pesach. Before he makes it into a warehouse, he empties it and makes the bracha, and he does bedika without a bracha. And therefore the shechiyonu is not a specific time. And he also institutes a new idea that since Bikur is totally in a time of the festival, it's enough that he says shechiyonu on Leil Yontiv, and it's inclusive of all the mitzvahs that one is going to do on the night of Pesach. We'll see the Gabi. Other mitzvahs of the Haggadah, shechiyonu of Kiddush covers them as well, and the Torah says this as well as in the name of the Rosh. Rabbeinu Manoach brings further a raya from the Gemara. Somebody makes a sukkah, he shouldn't make a shechiyonu only when he sits down to make Kiddush. So you see that it has nothing to do with making the sukkah, although that's the mitzvah, but utilizing it, and at that time you can include the Kiddush, the shechiyonu can include the Kiddush and the making of the sukkah. The Torah in Tuvlam and Beis states the Baal Yitur, you say shechiyonu on biur chometz, because it comes from time to time, but he mentions that there are those who say you don't make a brocha, because those who go out for a trip overseas or in a caravan, and even though they're going to come back, even if they left before Rosh Hashanah, you have to check then, and that's why you don't make a shechiyona, because there's no set time. And the Torah says it's a rishus. Whoever wants to can make a brocha. So the Rishus says if it's rishus, you should say misofik. In other words, since you could do it, you don't have to do it. You shouldn't make a brocha. The Bach cites that the Sfor of the Balei Ito is found also in Chuvas HaRashba. And at the end of his words, he said, the Rashba says, our minig is not to say Shechiyonu. The Bach asks a question from Rabbeinu Yerucham, who brings down that if you want to, you can say Shechiyonu, because just like when somebody makes a sukkah or lulav. So he's finding Rashba technically in contradiction, and he explains that what he says it's rishus, he means to say that we do not have a proof whether one should say it or not. So where the minig of the mokum is, they should say shechiyanu, then he can rely on those people. We'll turn the page, who are of the opinion that you say shechiyanu, and even to begin with, he can do so. You can't argue with him in a place where that's the minig. But the Rashba himself did not say shechiyanu because he didn't want to put himself into the questionable brocha. But he didn't want to say that others who had such a minig shouldn't do so. The Bach adds that the Kolboy writes as well, the name of Balo Ito, as Tolin the minig. And that's the Peirush of the Divrei Atur, that Mistavre Shusu. That means it depends upon where you are, and that way we understand the Beis Yosef, who says wasting is a suffix. It's not a suffix. We're discussing rather whether the people who have a minig should be told not to do it. How do you prepare the chametz before the bedika? Rabbeinu Menoich brings from the Rae Gann in his Chuvosov that there's a minig to leave some chametz before bedika, and this is he makes light of it, that it's a minig of women that do not have a root and has no reasoning behind it. And he continues, you don't make a brocha al metzias chametz. We're not making a brocha on the actual chometz, so we have to be choishish that if you won't find chometz, it's brochas levatolo. But rather you make a brocha on searching, and that's what you're doing, even if you don't find anything. Even if you don't think, and therefore, he feels you do not have to leave chometz. Beis Yosef brings down the name of the kolboy, that there was a minig in certain places, that they put away pieces of bread in certain parts of the house, so you should find it, and you should burn it. Because if you won't find anything, they were afraid it's a brocha about Tola. But the Beis Yosef says we have no fear of this, because even though it's a brocha, is on biur chometz, the kavona is right, is only that if it's found chometz, we shall burn it. According to Rabbeinu Manoach, the loshen on biur chometz means on biur from the house the chometz. Certainly, it doesn't matter that we don't find chometz because he was boidik and he made sure the house doesn't have chometz. That's the main interest. Going to the Ramah in the Barkei Moshe, he brings down a Shem Rabbi Yisrael, Brin, you have to leave Tokim, that's the minig, and according to the Ari, you leave 10 pieces, and that's another minig, which is not mentioned here. We will continue the Siman Halacha Zion in the next shiur.